Let's move straight on. We're going to hear from our first, I guess I wouldn't call him a keynote, but we're going to get some scene setters from Matt. And I can see Matt at the bottom of my screen, which is always reassuring when you're doing these virtual sessions, that you can actually see the person you're about to introduce. It's always a nice moment. Like, oh, good, he's actually there. How exciting. And we had a bit of a chat earlier this morning. Let me quickly put Matt Leighninger in context. Vice President at Public Agenda, fascinating place. I've already subscribed to their newsletter, which I did yesterday, and you should all go and do the same. Interestingly, too, involved in the development of something called Participedia, which I've also been exploring, the world's largest online repository of information on public engagement. Truly, if you want to find something out, I suspect Participedia might be the good place to start. He's done a lot of this work around digital engagement and citizen engagement. I think it says here over 100 communities, 40 states and 4 Canadian provinces. So he's got North America covered. Public Agenda is a US company, I gather, but very much active in North America. I think, Matt, I'm right in suggesting you're joining us from, I don't know whether it's sunny downtown Ontario or what kind of weather it is, but for the moment anyway, and for the next few minutes to set the scene, a very warm welcome to you. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Martin. Yes, it's very hot here in Hamilton, Ontario, just south of Toronto.
Oh,
and good evening to you all. And Martin, you used a phrase earlier when you said this was no better time and for engagement and participation. And I was reflecting on the fact that I actually organized a conference more than 10 years ago, 2009. We called it No Better Time for public participation. And I think we said that, well, I know we said that because, you know, we were kind of on the heels of a very exciting presidential election in the United States. And in the sense that not only in its rhetoric, but also in the way that the presidential campaign had been run, people understood the value of public participation, and we thought there was openness to this sort of thing. And yet, I think that 2020, for as awful a year as it has been, is in fact a better time. 2009 was a good time for this sort of work. There may have been openness, but there was not a crisis that demanded engagement. And right now, for all the awful things that have happened in 2020 all over the world, and certainly here in North America, there have been terrible, things going on, and also not just terrible things in terms of the pandemic, but in the terms of the George Floyd murder and also the Black Lives Matter protests, some recognition increasingly, thankfully, of racism as it has continued in the US and Canada. So that's not a sudden thing, but it's a recognition of an ongoing crisis. For both of those reasons and all of the bad things that come with them, there's a silver lining, and that is that people are increasingly willing to try many different forms of engagement. They have to. They are experimenting right now all over the world with all kinds of engagement that weren't necessary. They weren't a requirement before, so people just didn't go and do them. And now they are. And also, given the Black Lives Matter and those kinds of questions, people are looking at institutions with a different eye and looking at them in terms of their accountability to the public and thinking about, in the 21st century, how can institutions act in ways and interact with their residents, their constituents, their citizens in ways that actually provide a much better give and take, more deliberation, more interaction, more participation. So this is, I think, no better time. And we should take advantage of the silver linings here in this crisis. Let me say just a couple more things. I don't want to go on too long here, but I think that in terms of setting the stage here, my sense of this kind of work is that in general, we should all be looking for multi-channel sorts of approaches. There's no single tool, approach, app, meeting format, nothing like that is going to be the single thing that we need in every situation. We need a range of different sorts of things. And as Amelia said, we need both in-person and virtual sorts of engagement as part of a larger package to really kind of do all the things we need done. And then second of all, we need to be thinking in terms of systems. And I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here because I know the strength of engagement as has been happening in Australia and New Zealand, but we need to not just to think about engagement as, occasional activities to get to see what people think about a particular policy question. We need to think of it as part of the institutions, part of the systems, part of the way the communities function, because that's more efficient, in terms of how you do spend money in terms of participation. It's more equitable because it allows all kinds of people to have more of a role in setting the agenda. And it gets at more of the social capital benefits of engagement. And the fact that all kinds of research now shows that the stronger the social networks are, the stronger, the better people are engaged with one another on a daily basis, that has a direct quantifiable impact on their physical health, on how their kids are doing in school, on public safety, on economic development, on all kinds of other issues. So we need to be thinking about engagement, not just as an occasional exercise to deal with a public process or public decision, but something that is part of the fabric of our communities. One thing that's kind of been helpful to me as I'm looking at the way that engagement is working is to kind of think about it in terms of thin forms of engagement and thick. So thick forms of engagement generally are more about the small group. You're bringing people together, usually in small groups of some kind, can be online now. Usually in past times it was mostly in person, but you're getting people together to deliberate, to look at different options, talk about their personal experiences and how they relate to an issue, to talk about the different things that they want to do themselves, in addition to the recommendations that they make to public officials and others. That's thick engagement. It's more intensive. It usually has greater benefits. It's also a lot greater investment in terms of it's harder to organize. It requires a greater investment of time from the people who are participating and so on. Thin engagement is about the individual, and thin engagement in the previous century was about signing a petition in the park. It was something a quick activity that you did and that you didn't expect the world from it, but it was easy for you to do. Now, of course, with the internet, we have many kinds of thin engagement that are open to us. Quick, fast, convenient. We can get data. We can connect with others. It's not as intensive. It doesn't have the same degree of benefits as thick engagement, but it's much more citizen-centered. It's much more convenient. It's much more versatile. So in all these forms of engagement, part of, I think, what we need to be doing, and let me make this the last thought, is making sure that we know where people are, on the issues, where people are already engaging with one another, how their communities function both in person and online, where are they going online as well as where do they go in person. And it's from that analysis and understanding what people want, how they typically like to interact with one another, it's from that analysis that we will build more sustainable, more systemic forms of engagement, and that will make engagement better in all kinds of ways. So let me leave it at that and look forward to the rest of the conversation today.
Thank you, Matt. That's fantastic. I think a couple of things to frame there that we might keep in mind. This idea, I think, that we're at a time when we are deeply questioning the relationship between institutions and the people to whom they are supposed to be accountable. That's public, private, and non-profit and civil. It's the Bank of England, it's Red Cross, it's the government of Ontario, it's New Zealand government, and it's big corporates. So I think we're having big conversations about that. And I also love this idea of making this engagement function just a part of the fabric. It's not kind of, oh, well, on Monday we engage because that was when we did the engagement, but on Wednesday to Friday, we don't care at all about engagement because, we're just doing our work as if it's something separate. Very, very helpful.